Okay, so I did want to highlight something that happened interesting in the world of two things that really caught my attention this week in the world of AI that we need to be thinking about as we continue to grow. So, did anyone hear about the Claude Code exploit that was hacked that was done last week? You want to hear about this?
No, I didn't.
Yep, yep.
So basically, this is the first reported AI orchestrated cyber espionage campaign done by a state actor, meaning this was completely deployed using off-the-shelf tools, in this case, Claude Code, to make it autonomously a bunch of agents go in and hack tech companies, government agencies, media organizations, and a few other places. But basically, they say that they have tracked it down to some degree of certainty that it was Chinese state actors. I don't know if it actually goes into the details of how they figured that piece out, but that's less of what I'm concerned about, but more of like how they did it. And this is really, really interesting to me because one of the things that it really points out is that in military, there's this separation, right? There's this, whether it was the Manhattan Project where they built the nuclear weapons, whether it was, any sort of larger projects, you end up having, you only need to know what you need to know about this project. I'm making this wing. I have no idea what type of airplane it's for, but my goal is to make it so that it reduces draft by X, right? That's the only thing I know about this project, right? There's an orchestrator that's kind of like doing this. Well, they use that same concept in this hack. No individual Claude Code instance knew what was going on. They just thought that they were helping a cybersecurity specialist be a black hat, red teaming different things, was basically like, hey, I ran into this, handing it to another one. Hey, a friendly agent needs an exploit for this. Okay. And it was actually surprisingly easy to pull this off. I thought it was very interesting that they decided to use Claude Code for this. So still using like American tools to execute this. But basically they had, in phase one, they had a human operator. Basically it was like, hey, here's the target, right? So like the human was the only one that actually knew what all these were doing. So then the MCPs were called to, scan, search, data retrieval, code analysis. Basically the human would then review the summary. Then it would go through and it would direct a vulnerability scan based off those findings. And basically it would go through and it would in autonomously with AI agents go through and try to find these exploits. And then it would then send that over to different versions to then figure out how to get around these exploits. And this life cycle, they were able to, I mean, it's a really, really fascinating article, but as we go into the world of AI agents, this is going to increasingly be an extremely hard type of attack to prevent because of the degree of separation, because no individual, like you want to be able to have AI tools be able to help security researchers. But when you help security researchers, you also help hackers. When you help biologists come up with new vaccines, you also, need to teach it bioterror, stuff that could be used in bioterrorism. So there's always two edges to this sword that is going to be increasingly hard to govern. So I thought this was very interesting.
No, this is great. This is great. I thought it was a different news because I saw there was some other viruses that they were creating which self-evolve over time, right? They've been starting, I think Google put out an announcement, they found the first like self-evolving virus, which basically like uses AI from within the code to detect like when it's being caught and then rewrite itself so you cannot, detect it. So we're getting in a very interesting era, but I think it's like exactly the way you were saying, Brad, like it's the other side of the coin, right? Like we're creating these amazing tools that allow us to create a lot of new software and other things. Like it's bound to happen. And it can also create malicious software. We've always had like the white hat hackers, right? And the other one, so it's not new.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a yet another extremely wide playing field of green fields for both. So, there's definitely new tools for all the hackers, and there's definitely new tools for all the, safety researchers. It's definitely going to be a space that I will be really paying attention to over the coming years to ensure that we as well are, preventing, a lot of the work that you've done in guardrails, right? Prompt injection, things like that in our own platform, and making sure that, we can catch these things, because that's essentially how they caught this, is that they had their own guardrails kind of like flit. It was a little bit harder for them to figure it out because it was using so many different instances, but they end up finding it out, announcing it. And I do also too, I mean, I don't know if they're legally required to, but I'm really, glad that Anthropic, created this very, very, kind of report and detailed report about how their own tools were used in a malicious way. I think it's great learning for the rest of the industry. I really give Anthropic a lot of credit because they could have very easily just buried this, and not shared this with the community. But by
Mhm.
sharing this, it helps us all become better.
Right, right. They need to put it out there so people can start protecting around it. And you can also use Claude Code with other models. You don't necessarily need to use Anthropics. So I know there's some ways where you can like make it go to a different agent. We talked about K2 last week. I've seen people like playing around with that using Claude Code with Kimi. So yeah, it's not just that they can detect this on their end. It's the technology or the pattern they've used for this cyber attack that we all need to learn from. And funny you
Yeah.
mentioned prompt injection because that's one of the biggest flags right now with AI browsers. And I
Hmm.
think people are not talking about this enough. Prompt injection can be very, very, dangerous for your system. It's very easy